Emily Parker had always dreamed of working in one of the city's grandest estates. At 35, she had finally secured a position as a maid at Hawthorne Estate, a sprawling mansion owned by Alexander Hawthorne, a respected businessman known for his philanthropy and success. The estate was a symbol of power, wealth, and prestige, and Emily felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness as she stepped through its ornate gates for the first time. From the very first day, however, something felt off. The house was immaculate, the staff well-trained, and the routine strictly followed, yet there was an underlying tension that Emily couldn't ignore. The other staff members spoke in hushed tones, always careful with their words. Mr. Hawthorne commanded absolute perfection, and while the employees admired him for his generosity, they also feared his disapproval. One particular detail stood out to Emily almost immediately. Isabella Hawthorne, Alexander's stunning wife, never left the estate. Every morning, as Emily dusted the grand staircases or arranged fresh flowers in the lounge, she would see Isabella standing near the large windows, gazing longingly at the outside world. It was an unusual sight. Wealthy women often spent their days attending charity galas, shopping, or meeting with friends. Yet Isabella remained within the house, almost as if she were trapped. Adding to the mystery was Isabella's wardrobe. Despite the warm climate, she always wore elegant dresses with high collars or scarves that covered her neck completely. At first, Emily thought it was simply a style preference, but the more she observed, the stranger it seemed. No one else in the house seemed to find it unusual, or if they did, they never spoke about it. Emily's curiosity deepened one morning when she was assigned to serve breakfast to Mr. and Mrs. Hawthorne. It was her first time interacting directly with the couple, and she was determined to impress. As she carefully carried the silver tray up the grand staircase, she heard voices from inside the master bedroom. She paused at the door, hesitant to interrupt. "You know the rules." Alexander's voice was sharp, low, and commanding. "Don't make me remind you again." Isabella's response was too soft for Emily to hear, but there was something deeply unsettling about the exchange. When she knocked twice, as instructed, the voices stopped immediately. A moment later, the door opened, revealing Alexander, already fully dressed in an expensive suit. His expression was calm, but his eyes held a flicker of something unreadable. Emily placed the breakfast tray on the table, keeping her head down as she had been trained to do. She could feel Isabella's presence nearby, but didn't dare look up. The silence in the room was suffocating. As Emily turned to leave, Alexander's voice stopped her in her tracks. "Wait," he commanded. Her heart pounded. Had she done something wrong? "Is everything ready for today's meeting?" he asked, his voice neutral but firm. "Yes, sir," Emily replied quickly. "The lounge has been prepared, and the kitchen staff is finalizing the menu. The flowers have been arranged as requested." Alexander studied her for a moment before giving a curt nod. "Good." Emily stole a quick glance at Isabella, who sat quietly by the window, hands folded in her lap, her gaze unfocused. Something about her posture, rigid yet resigned, made Emily's stomach twist. As she exited the room, Emily couldn't shake the sense that she had just stepped into something much larger and darker than she had ever imagined. The morning air inside Hawthorne Estate buzzed with energy. The usually quiet mansion was now alive with movement as the staff prepared for an important gathering. Emily Parker, still new to the estate, was eager to prove herself. She polished the silverware with precision, ensuring that everything was immaculate, just as Alexander Hawthorne demanded. As she worked, she couldn't help but steal glances at Isabella Hawthorne, the lady of the house. Isabella was undeniably beautiful, with an air of quiet elegance, but there was a certain sadness about her. Unlike other wealthy women Emily had worked for, Isabella never seemed to enjoy the luxuries surrounding her. More importantly, she never left the estate. That morning, Emily was given a new task, serving breakfast to the Hawthornes in their master bedroom. It was an honor, and Emily knew it was a test. If she did well, she would prove herself as a trustworthy employee. As she carried the tray up the grand staircase, she heard voices sharp and hushed coming from behind the bedroom door. She hesitated, torn between announcing herself and avoiding an awkward moment. "You're embarrassing me, Isabella." Alexander's voice was cold, controlled, but laced with irritation. "I'm trying." Isabella's voice was softer, almost pleading. Emily's hands trembled slightly. She knew she shouldn't have heard that. She knocked twice, as instructed, and stepped inside. The room was immaculate, but the atmosphere was heavy. Alexander stood near the bathroom door, already dressed, his piercing gaze scanning her. Isabella sat by the window, her posture stiff, her hands clutching the folds of her silk dress. Emily quickly placed the tray on the table and turned to leave, but Alexander's voice stopped her. Wait, she froze. Had she done something wrong? Is everything ready for the guests? He asked. Yes, sir, Emily answered, keeping her voice steady. The lounge is set, the dining area has been arranged, and the menu is being finalized. Alexander studied her for a moment, then nodded. Good, that will be all. Emily hurried out of the room, but not before noticing something strange. Isabella's high-necked dress seemed looser than usual, and for a brief second, she thought she saw something beneath the fabric, a dark mark or a tattoo. It was just a glimpse, but a chill ran through Emily's body. As she made her way downstairs, she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right in Hawthorne Estate. Emily Parker had spent weeks working as a maid in Hawthorne Estate, an elegant mansion owned by Alexander Hawthorne, one of the most influential businessmen in the city. At first, the job had seemed like an incredible opportunity, high pay, professional staff, and the chance to work in a home that most could only dream of stepping foot in. However, beneath the estate's grandeur, something was deeply unsettling. What disturbed Emily the most was Isabella Hawthorne, Alexander's wife. Despite her wealth and beauty, she never left the estate. Unlike other high society women who attended charity events and lavish galas, Isabella remained hidden within the walls of her home. Her posture was always tense, and though she smiled in front of guests, her eyes never reflected happiness. One afternoon, Emily was sent to clean the master bedroom while the Hawthornes entertained guests. She moved cautiously, careful not to disturb anything. As she approached the walk-in wardrobe, she noticed something strange, a row of dresses, all with high collars and long sleeves. Even in the warmer months, Isabella always wore dresses that concealed her neck and arms. Curious, Emily reached out and ran her fingers over the fabric of one dress. The thought that had been nagging at her for weeks finally surfaced. Was Isabella hiding something? Just then, the door creaked open, and Isabella stood in the doorway, eyes wide with alarm. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Emily quickly stepped back. "I was just tidying up, ma'am. I didn't mean to intrude." Isabella hesitated before stepping inside and closing the door behind her. For the first time, there was no one watching, no staff, no Alexander. "Please," Emily continued, lowering her voice. "I don't mean to pry, but are you okay?" A flicker of something fear, maybe hope, crossed Isabella's face. She exhaled shakily, as though weighing a decision. Then, in a swift motion, she reached up and pulled down the collar of her dress, revealing a shocking sight. A barcode tattoo on the delicate skin of her neck. Emily's breath caught in her throat. A barcode. Not just any tattoo, a mark of ownership. Isabella's hands trembled as she readjusted her dress. "I don't have much time," she whispered. "But you need to understand, I was never Alexander's wife by choice. He bought me." Emily felt the blood drain from her face. Bought her? The word echoed in her mind, twisting her stomach with nausea. "I was taken when I was 16, Isabella continued, her voice barely audible. "I was meant to be a model, but instead, I was sold. I've been trapped ever since." Emily's hands clenched into fists. She had suspected something was wrong, but she had never imagined this. "I want to help you," she said firmly. "We can go to the police. They can protect you." "No," Isabella said quickly, her expression filled with panic. "You don't understand what he's capable of. If he finds out you know—" She broke off, glancing toward the door, as if expecting Alexander to appear at any moment. Emily knew she should leave it alone. That getting involved was dangerous. But could she really walk away knowing the truth? "I'll find a way," she promised. "You don't have to be alone in this." For the first time since Emily had met her, Isabella looked at her with something close to hope. The heavy tension inside Hawthorne Estate had been suffocating for weeks, but tonight, something felt different. Emily Parker, a maid who had been working in the grand mansion for just over a month, had discovered something far more sinister than she ever expected. She had always been suspicious of the relationship between Alexander Hawthorne, the esteemed businessman, and his wife, Isabella. Unlike most wealthy women, Isabella never attended events or left the estate. When she did appear, She wore dresses that concealed every inch of her skin, especially her neck. Emily had overheard heated arguments behind closed doors, had seen the fearful look in Isabella's eyes when Alexander was near, and, most disturbingly, had discovered a barcode tattoo hidden beneath Isabella's collar. That discovery had changed everything. Tonight, Emily's heart pounded in her chest as she watched Alexander entertain a group of influential business associates. The estate was filled with guests, their laughter and conversation creating a deceptive illusion of normalcy. But Emily knew the truth, and more importantly, she knew that Isabella was running out of time. Determined to act, Emily discreetly approached Officer Daniel Reeves, a guest at the gathering. He was a high-ranking police officer, someone with the authority to intervene. Taking a deep breath, she whispered, "I need to speak with you. It's about Isabella." Reeves raised an eyebrow but nodded, sensing the urgency in her voice. They slipped away from the party, moving to a secluded hallway where Emily unloaded everything she had discovered: the barcode, Isabella's captivity, and Alexander's controlling nature. "This isn't just about an abusive marriage," Emily said, her voice trembling. "She was trafficked. She was bought." Reeves's expression darkened. "Are you absolutely certain?" Emily nodded. "If we wait any longer, he might make her disappear." Reeves didn't hesitate. He reached for his radio and quietly called for backup. Meanwhile, inside the ballroom, Isabella sat beside Alexander, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She was the picture of elegance, but Emily could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers dug into the fabric of her gown. Then, the sound of sirens cut through the evening air. The guests turned in confusion as police vehicles pulled into the estate's driveway. Officers stormed through the grand entrance, their presence sending a ripple of unease through the crowd. "What the hell is this?" Alexander demanded, rising to his feet as Reeves stepped forward, flashing his badge. "Mr. Hawthorne," Reeves said sternly, "we have reason to believe that your wife, Isabella Hawthorne, is being held here against her will." Gasps filled the room. Isabella's eyes widened, flickering to Emily in disbelief. Alexander scoffed, masking his fear with arrogance. "That's absurd. My wife is right here, perfectly safe." He turned to Isabella. "Tell them, darling." For a moment, the room held its breath. All Isabella had to do was say the words to confirm the lie, and Reeves would have no cause to intervene. But then, slowly, Isabella stood up. She faltered, her gaze sweeping over the officers, over Alexander's cold, unforgiving stare, and finally landing on Emily. Emily gave her the smallest nod. "You're not alone." Taking a deep breath, Isabella pulled down the collar of her dress, revealing the barcode tattoo. A stunned silence fell over the room. Alexander's face drained of color. "That," Isabella said, her voice steadier than Emily had ever heard it, "is proof that I was never free." The officers moved in immediately. Alexander lunged toward Isabella, but Reeves and his men were faster. They grabbed his arms, twisting them behind his back as he struggled and shouted. "You lying? You think you can take everything from me?" Alexander raged. "I own you!" "No," Isabella whispered. "Not anymore." As Alexander was dragged away in handcuffs, Isabella exhaled shakily. Tears welled in her eyes, not of fear, but of relief. Emily stepped forward, placing a reassuring hand on her arm. "It's over," she said softly. Isabella turned to her, a small, trembling smile forming for the first time in years. "Because of you," she murmured. As the officers led them away from the estate, Isabella took one last look at the mansion that had been her prison for so many years. Then she turned away toward freedom. As the police car pulled away from Hawthorne Estate, Isabella Hawthorne sat in the back seat, staring out the window at the mansion that had been her prison for the last 5 years. The flashing red and blue lights reflected off its grand facade, making it look almost surreal. Beside her sat Emily Parker, the maid who had risked everything to help her escape, and Hannah, Emily's sister, who still looked stunned by everything that had unfolded. The weight of the night settled heavily on Isabella's shoulders. Alexander Hawthorne, the man who had bought her, controlled her, and made her life a living nightmare, was now sitting in the back of another police car, in handcuffs. The man who had spent years ensuring that she belonged to him was now powerless. The car ride was silent for a while. broken only by the hum of the engine and the occasional crackle of the police radio. Officer Daniel Reeves, sitting in the front seat, glanced at Isabella through the rearview mirror. "We'll take you to the station first. You'll need to give an official statement, and then we'll make arrangements for your protection," he said gently. Isabella nodded numbly. Protection. The very idea of it felt foreign. For years, she had been the one needing protection from Alexander. Emily, sitting beside her, reached out and gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. "You're safe now," she whispered. Isabella swallowed hard, feeling the burn of unshed tears. Safe. She never thought she would hear those words and believe them. When they arrived at the police station, the bright overhead lights made Isabella squint as she stepped out of the car. Officers and detectives bustled around, their voices blending into an overwhelming background noise. A female officer approached and led Isabella to a private room where she would recount everything that had happened. Emily and Hannah waited outside, while Officer Reeves and another detective sat across from her. The detective, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, set a recorder on the table and gave Isabella an encouraging nod. "Take your time," she said. "Start from the beginning." Isabella took a shaky breath and, for the first time, told her story in full. She told them how she had been taken from an orphanage at 16, lured with promises of a modeling career, how she had been trafficked into a hidden network of the rich and powerful, branded with a barcode tattoo that marked her as a commodity, how Alexander had bought her, giving her a new name, a new life, a life of luxury that masked imprisonment. As she spoke, she watched the expressions of the officers change from concern to horror, then to quiet rage. They weren't just hearing a story. They were piecing together the puzzle of something much larger than one woman's captivity. When she finished, her throat was raw and her hands trembled. Officer Reeves leaned forward. "Isabella?" He paused. "Would you like to go back to your original name? We can update your records to reflect who you really are." She hesitated, staring at her reflection in the one-way mirror across the room. Amelia Sinclair. That was the name she had been born with, the name she had been stolen from. But that girl had not survived. "No," she said firmly. "My name is Isabella. The name he gave me doesn't define me, but the person I've become does." Reeves nodded in understanding. "Then, Isabella it is." After the statement, Isabella was taken to a quiet room where Emily and Hannah were waiting. As soon as she stepped inside, Emily rushed to her. "How do you feel?" Isabella let out a shaky breath. "Like I can finally breathe." A female officer knocked on the door, stepping inside. "We've arranged for a safe house. You'll be protected while we work to take down the entire operation. Do you have anyone, friends, family you'd like us to contact?" Isabella shook her head. "I have no one." Emily stepped forward. "She has us." The officer smiled warmly. "Then I'll make sure you all stay together." For the first time in years, Isabella felt like she had a choice in where she went, what she did, and who she could trust. And that choice meant everything. The flashing police lights outside Hawthorne Estate had disappeared into the night, leaving behind only the hollow silence of a house that had lost its master. Inside, the remaining staff huddled together in the grand foyer, their whispered conversations filled with uncertainty. Emily Parker stood by the large windows, her eyes scanning the long driveway where the police cars had disappeared just minutes ago. Beside her, Hannah, her sister, remained quiet, still processing the events that had just unfolded. But Isabella Hawthorne, the woman they had risked everything to save, was gone, finally free. For years, Alexander Hawthorne had ruled over this house with an iron grip, his wealth and status shielding him from suspicion. His employees had admired him, envied his power, and in some cases, even feared him. But now, with his arrest, his empire was crumbling. Jonathan, the head butler, cleared his throat, his usual composed demeanor barely holding. "I suppose we should begin packing," he said, looking around at the other staff. "Without Mr. Hawthorne, the estate will likely be sold." Marco, the head chef, scoffed. "Good riddance. That man—" He stopped himself, shaking his head. "I don't know how we didn't see it sooner." Emily turned to him. "We saw what we wanted to see. That's how he got away with it for so long." Marco frowned. "Still, I can't believe Isabella was—" "A prisoner," Hannah finished for him. Because that's what she was. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. The thought of Isabella, the poised and elegant wife of Alexander Hawthorne, being nothing more than a captive hidden in plain sight, was something none of them had been willing to consider before. But now, they could no longer deny the truth. "I should have done more," Jonathan muttered, rubbing his temple. Emily turned to him. "We all should have." The grand house felt hollow now, stripped of its former grandeur. It had always been too perfect, too polished, because it had to be. Alexander had controlled everything, ensuring that the illusion of his perfect life remained intact. But illusions always shattered. As the night dragged on, the remaining staff gathered in the servants' quarters, uncertain of what to do next. Without their employer, they had no jobs, no certainty about their futures. The Hawthorne fortune would be investigated, assets possibly frozen, and with the scandal soon to break in the media, no one would want to be associated with the estate. "What's going to happen to all of us?" one of the younger maids, Lily, asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jonathan sighed, rubbing his temples. "We'll all have to find other jobs. It's not like anyone is going to be running this place anymore." Emily remained silent. She had already made up her mind she wasn't staying here another minute longer than she had to. Hannah nudged her. "What about you?" Emily exhaled slowly. "I don't know, but I'm not staying." Hannah nodded, understanding. "Are you going to find Isabella?" Emily hesitated. The thought had been lingering in her mind since she saw Isabella being taken away in the police car. After everything they had been through together, it didn't feel right to just let her go without knowing what would happen next. "I think so," she admitted. "She shouldn't have to go through this alone." Marco leaned back in his chair. "I still can't believe she was, you know." No one had the words to finish his sentence. For years, they had thought Isabella was simply a delicate, pampered woman, shielded from the world by her wealthy husband. But the reality was far more horrifying. She had been bought, branded, and trapped in a world she never chose. Jonathan exhaled deeply. "I just keep thinking, what if we had noticed sooner?" Emily looked down. "Then maybe we could have saved her sooner." A house with no master. By the time morning arrived, most of the staff had already begun packing. The once perfectly maintained mansion now felt abandoned, its halls echoing with an eerie emptiness. Emily stood by the staircase, looking up at the master bedroom where everything had started. The place where she had first noticed Isabella's fear. The place where she had found out the truth. She wasn't sure what she was expecting to feel: relief, satisfaction. Instead, she felt anger. Anger at Alexander Hawthorne for what he had done. Anger at herself for not seeing the truth sooner. Anger at a world where men like Alexander could buy and own women without anyone questioning it. She took a deep breath and turned to Hannah. "Let's go." "Where?" Hannah asked. Emily didn't hesitate. "To find Isabella." Hannah frowned. "Do you even know where she is?" "No," Emily admitted. "But she has no one else. And after everything she's been through, she shouldn't have to start over alone." Hannah studied her for a moment before nodding. "Then let's go." They didn't look back as they left Hawthorne Estate behind. The house, once a symbol of power and prestige, stood empty, just another illusion shattered by the truth. The story of Emily, Isabella, and the fall of the Hawthorne Estate serves as a stark reminder that evil can thrive in silence, and that appearances can be deceiving. It teaches us that wealth and power do not equate to goodness sometimes. They serve as a shield for the worst kinds of crimes. But, more importantly, it highlights the power of awareness, empathy, and action. Emily could have ignored the signs, like so many others before her. She could have accepted the illusion of perfection and carried on with her life. But she didn't. She chose to see the truth, to question, to stand up even when it was dangerous. In doing so, she not only changed Isabella's fate, but also broke the cycle of silence that allowed injustice to exist. This story challenges us to be more observant, to listen to those who cannot speak for themselves, and to act when something feels wrong. Courage is not the absence of fear, it is the willingness to do what is right despite it. The world needs more people willing to ask questions, to challenge the status quo, and to stand up for those who cannot stand up for themselves. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. See you in the next one. If you enjoyed this video, Don't forget to hit the like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. See you in the next one.